This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Hi there, everyone, and I would like to welcome you to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy day to listen to our podcast. By the way, we are WeatherWorks, a private forecasting company here in beautiful Northwest New Jersey. You can always check us out at weatherworksinc.com. Now, let me introduce to you my co-host, the one, the only meteorologist, Mike Mahalik. Hey there, Mike.
Hey, Brad. How are you doing today? I'm excited about this podcast.
Yes, this is a topic that snow lovers will really enjoy, I think. If you don't like snow, unfortunately, this may not be what you want to hear but it's the middle of winter, so we need to address blizzards, Mike, and it's going to be a pretty popular, I think, podcast topic this week.
Yeah, I mean, it can be popular with, again, those snow lovers out there, but if you're not a snow lover, I mean, blizzards can be very dangerous. It's not all about just sitting and looking out the window, enjoying a nice hot cup of coffee or whatever, and just saying, oh, look at that beautiful snow and drift. No, some people have to drive in it to work.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have to, do snow removal and snow and ice removal for it, which a lot of our clients do at WeatherWorks. So blizzards aren't all fun for everybody, and they can be dangerous. So
yes, I was gonna say they can be dangerous, and it's the preparation that sometimes goes into not only the expectation of a blizzard, but if it's gonna be a big snowstorm or it's gonna have the blizzard conditions involved with it, then folks do have to do certain things beforehand, in
Right.
case power goes out. And like you said, snow removers and folks like that. And also the hype factor. It's, as a meteorologist, sometimes we need to kind of quell the hype, because not saying that it can't happen and you can't have a blizzard. Obviously, they happen almost every year. Whether it's in the Northeast or the Midwest or wherever. But sometimes it can get out of hand when that blizzard term is thrown around. It's almost like the summertime when the hurricane
Right.
gets thrown around the Northeast, and you got to be careful with it. At the same time, you got to also take it very seriously. And a blizzard is like you said, it can be fun. The kids love it, of course. Lots of snow.
Yeah.
But as adults, and you got to still continue with life, and folks working. You got to prepare for these things. So I guess the easiest thing to do is maybe just talk about what a blizzard is. What is the actual definition, Mike, of a blizzard?
So here's the thing. A lot of times people throw around the word blizzard just when there's going to be a heavy snowfall. If it's going to be a foot or more of snow, so people throw around, hey, it's going to be a blizzard. But really, the actual definition of a blizzard is sustained or frequent wind gusts to 35 miles an hour or more for 3 hours or more, with considerable falling or blowing snow, reducing visibility less than a quarter mile frequently. So right by that definition, you don't even need snow to be falling from the sky to get blizzard conditions.
Right.
You could have snow on the ground that's been there for days, but the winds are so strong that it's kicking it up, it's blowing the snow off the ground and reducing that visibility also. So it's not just, that big heavy snow. There's actual criteria that we use to name something a blizzard. And that's kind of important because a lot of our snowplow contractors that are out there, a lot of our clients here at WeatherWorks, they might have blizzard clauses within their contracts that they might get paid differently if something is deemed a blizzard. So it's something that really has to be careful, and we can't just throw it all out there, willy-nilly here every time it snows.
And to differentiate between them, I mean, you can actually have the correct ingredients to, quote, have a blizzard, but at the same time, if you're not at that 3-hour threshold, or the winds are maybe 25 to 30 and not 35, you can still have blizzard-like conditions, which you hear a lot, not only again in the media, on TV, but also you'll see it on social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. We have blizzard-like conditions here. Again, that's a good way to maybe describe the current conditions, but it may not be technically reaching that blizzard threshold that I
Right.
guess the Weather Service would have to actually, determine after the storm usually, or during the storm too.
Yeah, and they do have that. They do deem things blizzards after the
Right,
fact. Blizzard conditions were reported at this site for
right.
this many hours. That sort of thing. They do have that after storms. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, Brad, look, a lot of us in the Northeast, we have those blizzard stories, I'm sure.
Yes.
We've all dealt with them in some fashion or another. But before we get crazy into the blizzards and that whole topic, because I know everybody loves that, at least a lot of these snow lovers, let's just take a short break. And right after that, we'll have the rest of this podcast about blizzards. So stay with us.
Have you ever wanted to know exactly how much snow or ice just fell in your backyard? Or how much snow you just plowed from that 2-acre parking lot? How about getting documentation that explains why you applied several applications of salt to a busy apartment complex? When it comes down to snow and ice verification, it can be a headache trying to find accurate totals for the busy winter season. Certified snowfall totals from WeatherWorks provide a stress-free way to get reliable information for the exact location you need. It is your complete winter weather verification platform. For more information, visit CertifiedSnowfallTotals.com today or call us at 908-850-8600. When you think weather, think WeatherWorks.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and today's podcast topic are blizzards. And Mike, we've already kind of talked about the definition of a blizzard, but a lot of folks, when they're dealing with a heavy snowstorm, again, it doesn't have to only be in the Northeast, Midwest, anywhere that has blizzard conditions. It could even be in the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's in the July, August timeframe for those folks. But it's something that if somebody's looking outside the window and they see the snow falling sideways, and you can barely see your end of their driveway,
Mm-hmm.
and people are going to say, hey, it's a blizzard outside right now. Technically, it may not be, but
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what you have to think about, the blizzard conditions. So yeah, we deal with nor'easters. So I guess what we're going to have to talk about first is, how do you differentiate between just what we want to call, quote, a typical snowstorm versus what a blizzard really is?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously we have the definition that we talked about in the first portion of the program, but I think typically if we're going to get blizzard conditions in the Northeast per se, we're kind of looking for that nor'easter to develop. So,
Right.
and there's several ways that can happen. Usually these storms can track across the Midwest as a clipper type system, and once they hit the coast, they really energize and explode into a deepening low pressure system that develops into that big coastal storm or nor'easter. Now, a lot of times in that type of situation, it's actually called a Miller B, and it's not named after Brad
Yeah.
Miller. That's for sure. But a Miller B usually will affect more New England, southern New England, with a lot of their heavy
Right.
snows when those storms form. Another way they could form is basically taking more of a southern track through the southern states, maybe even
Is that a
through,
Miller A?
it is through Texas into the Gulf of Mexico, and then coming all the way up the eastern seaboard.
Right.
And that's another way. That is your Miller A storm, and those are quite interesting. Also, they can be
Those are the real whoppers, those kind.
very, very powerful. Blizzard of '93 is one that comes to mind. That was a classic example.
Yeah,
Of
well,
a
we'll
Miller
definitely
A.
talk about that in a little bit.
But other things you need, obviously, with these type of storms, to get the snow, you're going to need big high pressures to the north side of them. So that certainly needs to be there. And also, a blocking high over Greenland is a good thing to have too, because you want that storm to kind of slow down as it hits the coast, have some time to develop, and really explode. So those blocking highs are definitely good too.
Yeah, and I was gonna say one thing that I just even noticed when I was growing up, before I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist, when I was just kind of a weather hobbyist, and I kind of enjoyed watching the radar. But I could always tell if it was going to be a big snowstorm or a
Mm-hmm.
blizzard versus maybe a couple of inches of snow. Because I used to always notice if you looked at the radar, and again, this is in the Northeast, if you're
Mm-hmm.
watching the radar and it's kind of progressive, and what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is all the precipitation's kind of moving from southwest to northeast kind of rapidly. And yeah, you're getting snow, but you can already see the back end of the snow is probably an hour or two away. So you know it's not going to last all that long. However, when you get these big storms, you get the nor'easters and potential blizzards, what you do is you get that pivot almost
Mm-hmm.
to where the storm slows down so much that the radar or the precip almost kind of catches up with the storm, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
you start to see the precip working in from the ocean, from the east, pushing west. And when you see the precipitation moving from east to west,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all snow, then you know you're in for the long haul because it's not going to move out anytime soon, and usually it's only going to start picking up in that snowfall rate. So
Yeah.
that's how you get your big storms and the blizzards. Of course, you add in the wind with a deepening low, and voila, you got yourself a blizzard.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we have that situation of that the moisture is just being pumped in from the Atlantic Ocean at that
Right.
point. So that's where it's all coming from. That's why you see that east to west motion.
And on the technical side, that's the warm conveyor belt actually moving
Hmm.
with the storm. And maybe one day we'll talk more about the technicalities of how all that works. But basically, it's the warm,
Hmm.
moist air that's being fed into a cold, dry air
Hmm.
mass, and that's how you get so much snow because there's so much moisture available.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times these can slow down when they hit the coast too, because if I've already seen, I think it was back in February of, I believe, 2011, where we had a storm that exploded off the coast and it actually stalled, and then it backed in from southern New England. And I think it ended
Right.
up giving the Hudson Valley about 30 inches of snow, something like that. And I think in northwest New Jersey, where our office is, it was around 11 inches or 12 inches, something like that. We were right on the edge of the real heavy stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you have that stalling situation with these blizzards, especially in the Northeast, that's when they can really lay down those heavy 2 to 3 foot amounts.
Yeah.
Storms that have done that and moved slowly. Uh, January 1996 and the blizzard of '96 that did it. There was January of 2016
Yes.
that also did the similar path of the blizzard of '96. But we're talking Northeast, but look, these blizzards can happen all across the country. We've had one occur back in 2011. It was called the Groundhog Day blizzard out in Chicagoland.
Right.
There was thunder and lightning, and there was heavy snow rates. I think their winds were like 50 to 60 miles an hour or more.
Right.
Drifts of 10 feet. I mean, it can happen there too. It can happen in the Rockies when those strong fronts come across, and they get the high winds also.
And, and
So,
and the process is a little bit different out there, though, too, because they don't have the big ocean to supply all that moisture. So
right.
really, it's such a dynamic process. And some of the snowstorms and the blizzards in the Midwest and the Rockies, like I said, can get so deep, almost to the point where they're like a hurricane type
Mm.
pressure in them because they have to generate so much, dynamic moisture. That's the only way that they can. They don't have the ocean there to supply all that moisture, so they have to get a different way, and it's all done dynamically that way. And
Yeah.
it's an amazing process to see the storms out there versus like a big nor'easter.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's a really tight pressure gradient to get those winds going too, because you have a big, like, could be a 1050 type high
High, yeah,
coming down, meeting up with that storm developing maybe just east of the Rockies, maybe in Colorado.
yeah.
And
And then
when you
falls,
get
you get lows down around the 965 to 970, which is like incredible.
Yeah, especially when they wrap up and go into the upper plain states. A lot of
Hmm.
times, the Dakotas can get hit with something very low. I think there was a very strong storm that came. Geez, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I remember. I think it might have set the land
Oh
low pressure
yes.
record, but I can't remember what the date was on that. But moving away from development and things like that, I mean, one of the things that's really dangerous with nor'easters and blizzards and things like that are whiteout conditions.
Right.
So Brad, what's basically a whiteout?
I mean,
And we're not talking about
it's
Penn State football here, even though that's what I would think,
yeah.
but as a Penn State grad.
Same kind of idea though. I mean, it's the snow is basically falling sideways. The wind is so high that you have blowing snow mixed in with falling snow, and pretty much the visibility gets down to the point where you can't see that much in front of you. I think you can almost think about it as like dense fog. When you drive around in fog, and sometimes it's so dense that you can only see maybe a couple of 100 yards ahead of you, and it's almost it's tough to drive. And whiteout conditions, same thing. It's the visibility is so low, and it's because of the snow that's falling or blowing. That it's just suspended in the atmosphere where you just can't see. And by that time, hopefully you're not driving around too much, because it's dangerous, for visibility purposes, and two, I'm sure the roads aren't all that great if you have whiteout conditions at that time.
Definitely. And it should be noted that, hey, whiteout conditions, they can occur in the blizzards, but it doesn't always have to be in a blizzard. We can get whiteout conditions even in snow squalls when they come off the Great Lakes. And those can be very dangerous too, because it goes from basically perfect visibility to just about zero when that snow squall comes through. And if you're on the highway when that happens, that is definitely not a place you want to be.
And unfortunately, every year you read about something like that. It's there's always some kind of instance where it's a major highway, and like you said, a snow squall comes in, and visibility drops so fast, and the roads deteriorate so rapidly that it just creates a chain reaction of an accident. And you know what? And truthfully, I think snow squalls to a point can almost be more dangerous than a blizzard, because a blizzard, look, you can forecast it. You can say it's going to be bad tomorrow. Probably not a good idea to be outside. Don't be traveling. Prepare for indoors for the next couple of days, because we're going to get a foot of snow with a lot of wind and cold. And a lot of people, of course, prepare for that. Now, a snow squall, it could be 40 degrees on a nice January day almost, and there's not too many clouds, and all of a sudden you get that snow squall, and before you know it, temperature drops to 30, and you've got snow falling so fast that it's accumulating on the road, and at the same time the visibility drops. So and not everyone can understand that it could happen so fast, and so I think that the snow squall with the whiteout conditions are a lot more dangerous than the blizzard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been forecasting the weather in places of Connecticut, and it's not only near the Great Lakes. These things can come off the Great Lakes. They can get all the way into the I-95 corridor.
Sure.
But I remember a couple times in northern Connecticut where it might have been a half-hour snow squall, and they got 2 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And that's just, think about that rate. That's just amazing right there. What was that, 4 inch an hour rate?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely dangerous conditions. I'll tell you what is a real problem. Definitely a problem I always had as a kid when a blizzard would hit. Measuring the snow. You get this big blizzard, lots of wind, it's blowing all over the place, things drift real easy. And man, does it get hard to measure, because you're trying to get an accurate amount, but you can't.
It's not cooperating.
It's a tough one. So, for those who are trying to measure a blizzard out there, or trying to measure all those snowfalls, when it's drifting so much, you have to get multiple measurements around the entire area,
right,
and then average that.
Take an average,
and then you'll have a better idea of how much snow has fallen.
I mean, you can. I mean, if you've had your typical snowstorm / blizzards, and you go in your backyard and you're like, wow, there's like 3 feet of snow here, but then on the other side of the backyard there may be only 3 or 4 inches. And that's again because of that drifting and just the piling up the snow, and also the snow ratio. We've talked about this in other podcasts, Mike. This also is a big issue when you're trying to measure snow. And typically with blizzards, you do have temperatures that are at least in the 20s. So your snow ratio is usually in a good 15 to 20 to 1. So it's a drier snow most of the time. And again, that's going to also help to suspend it in the air more and lead to those whiteout conditions. But the drier snow is more typical of a blizzard versus just a wetter, heavier snow when you deal with maybe a nor'easter, even when it's like 30, 32 degrees.
Yeah. I mean, there's several different ways that happens too. I mean, it can be driven dynamically by making that higher ratio snow, especially on the northwest sides of nor'easters in the northeast. You can get these
Right.
deformation zones, they're called, where a real heavy band, we like to kind of kiddingly refer to it as death bands.
Death band, yeah.
But obviously, it's no death going on there. But it's just snowing so hard where you're getting those 3-4 inch an hour type rates
Right.
within those bands of.
And you typically just sit over a certain area, a narrow area for a couple hours, and that's how fast that snow can pile up.
And that's the key to nor'easter forecasting too, because that band, wherever that sets up, that's where the heavy snow is going to fall. And a lot of times, if that's off by 25 miles, you got a big problem.
Right.
You definitely, can have your forecast go wrong because it might be a very thin band of snow. It might only be, 20 miles across. And then what happens is then you got to see when that storm is going to kind of stall and pivot, because where that pivot happens and where that zone of heavy snow just keeps staying over the same region for a long period of time, that's where you're going to get your 2-3 feet type amounts in these storms.
And that's where the gradient sometimes sets up. When you mentioned that in the first part of the podcast, and that's the hard part to try to figure out. Like you said, I mean, you can have, within a span of 50 miles, maybe go from almost no snow to a couple of feet, and it's not all the time. You hope that you kind of get more of a tapering effect with the snow, which is a little bit easier to forecast. But it's hard to tell. Like let's take New Jersey for an example. Maybe you tell like northern New Jersey, hey, you're only going to get an inch or two of snow, but then you get down towards like South Jersey and they're expecting a foot or two, because it's just where the gradient sets up sometimes. And sometimes it's the opposite. But it's something that, like you said, it's hard to determine sometimes. And
Sure.
and I guess we'll get into storms now. We might as well just start talking about some of the blizzards. And the first one that comes to my mind is actually one of the first big ones I remember at WeatherWorks. And that was the January 2016 storm. And that was a perfect example, Mike, of a tight gradient in a storm.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty amazing. I mean, I actually, believe it or not.
Well, where you lived, you got hammered.
Believe it or not, I didn't actually work the storm very much because my son was just born.
Oh, that's right.
But I was still paying attention to everything that was going on, and where I live in the Lehigh Valley in eastern Pennsylvania, we had about 30 or more inches of snow from that storm. Now, Brad talks about gradients. There was a good high pressure to the north, so there's a really tight cutoff between heavy snow and nothing. And I think Scranton, they might have gotten a couple inches at best.
That was it, yeah.
It wasn't a whole lot by any means. So you just think about that. I mean, the distance there from the Lehigh Valley to Scranton is, 40 miles? Something like that, maybe 50 miles. It's not very far.
I think I was gonna say the one thing I remember them talking about, and like on media and TV, was like if you went on the northeast extension of the turnpike, well, it used to be called northeast extension, but pretty much if you went from Scranton and travel down to Allentown, which I think is only like 2 or 3 exits, you'd go from an open highway with hardly any snow to completely shut down. Yeah. And again, like you said, it's only maybe a 45-minute drive between the two cities, or the two exchanges, or 3 exchanges. And I mean, it's incredible to go from 2 to 3 feet of snow to just a few inches in that amount of distance.
And that storm was very interesting too, because initially some of the forecasts were a bit further south with the heaviest snow, but every model run that came in was kind of getting closer to the north, a little bit
creeping
further
north,
a little bit further north. So now, where you were forecasting 2 feet of snow, that area is moving up north. And since it was such a tight gradient, you're having forecasts go from maybe 6 to 10 inches to 20 to 30 inches.
Yeah.
Very
Within
easily.
about a 12-hour time frame, you're
Um,
thinking, oh my gosh, I got to change it again. I got to change it again. I got to
yeah.
change this forecast again. And you got to go with the flow. And that's what happens sometimes.
Things like that do happen, but you got to stay on top of it as a meteorologist. You can't just keep going with a 6 to 10 inch forecast when it's going to be 2 feet. I mean,
Right.
people will, yeah, it's bad to tell them that the forecast is changing this much, but it's worse to let it sit
Yeah,
there, and then they're going to get 2 feet of snow and they didn't
yeah,
expect it.
it is what it
Um,
is.
but it's interesting though because the January 2016 storm was almost a carbon copy of the January 1996 storm, which happened much of the same way. Big moisture feed coming up from the south, a nice high pressure to the north, really tight gradient again, and we had again, it was 2 feet plus type snow from places in Maryland all the way up through the Lehigh Valley and into parts of the Poconos. So
Yeah, that I think I remember that storm because I was in college still. I think it was just starting out, or maybe I was in there a year or two. But I remember I was home for some reason. Maybe it was right before I went back for my spring semester because it was, I think, the second week of January, maybe.
yeah,
But anyway, I think is at the and I'm in the Poconos, and I think that was the most snow I've ever seen on the ground at once. I mean, I remember the snow was up to my chest. I mean,
yeah,
it had to be at least 3.5 feet on the ground.
yeah,
And that was the most snow I've ever seen. Because I think there was some other snow from a previous storm,
yeah,
but that one just added another 2.5 feet, and it was the most snow I've ever seen on the ground at one time.
yeah. A lot of drifting there with that storm too. I remember, at my parents' house, going to go out the back door of the garage, and basically I opened the door and it was just a wall of snow all the
Yeah,
way up to the top of the door there. So, and all I saw was the door impression
yeah,
in
yeah.
the
That's always
snow,
kind of neat. You
and
see,
I'm like, oh man. And then you open up the garage door, there's a nice 3.5 foot drift there, and I'm going, oh my goodness. You know, now you gotta shovel off the top of it and then shovel off the bottom of it to get to. Oh man, no snowblower was to be had at that house, at my house.
yeah.
To
And
tell you.
well, and then maybe go off topic just a hair on this one. That was followed by uh, a very fast warming trend.
Hmm.
And if you remember, that was the year that we had all the flooding. Then about 2 weeks later, I think
Yeah,
it was.
I was very upset about that because all my snow disappeared.
Yeah, it did. And then we
So,
had major flooding in parts of
yeah,
Pennsylvania and even to New Jersey.
yeah. But I always look at that storm, comparing that storm to the 2016 storm. What is that? 20 years later,
Yeah,
at the snow removal efforts, because in 1996, I feel like it was much worse. It wasn't as good as what a job they do now.
no, you're right.
I think I was off of school for about a week because the roads kept blowing shut and things like that. Whereas in the 2016 storm, I feel like after a day or two, everything was down to
Yeah,
pavement. So I mean, snow removal has come a long way, and de-icing efforts have come a long way. So kudos to all of our clients out there that do that because they
yeah.
did a
No, I
fantastic job.
definitely, I think as a kid, I think snow removal was so different compared to. I mean, like you said, I mean, you get a snowstorm, even if you get a foot of snow, usually by the next day you can travel on most roads. I mean, they're by then they're usually just wet and they're all for the most part clear. Maybe some side roads are still bad. Even if you get a cold shot after some of these storms,
Mm,
the roads are generally pretty good within 24 hours, even after a significant snowfall. So,
yeah,
like you said, kudos to all the snow removers, and it's
absolutely.
different now, that's for sure, than when I was a kid. I can remember it was just days upon days where it would take for some of those side roads to get finished even.
Yeah, and also to the 96 storms credit, that's also where Frank Lombardo decided that he needed to hire somebody new because he couldn't
At
do it
WeatherWorks, yeah.
at WeatherWorks anymore on his own. And that's when the expansion began. He hired Tommy Else, one of our senior meteorologists,
Yeah.
and from then on, he kept hiring, growing and expanding the business. So that storm was kind of pivotal to WeatherWorks history, really.
Yeah, and he talked about that storm a lot in the podcast that we dedicated to Frank, a couple weeks ago. So if you want to go
absolutely.
back and re-listen to that, it's a very interesting topic. That was basically it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Is like, I can't do this anymore by myself.
Right. So, I mean, hey, we're talking about Northeast storms, but let's shift out to the Midwest real quick. The
Yeah,
Groundhog Day blizzard of 2011.
2011. Yeah.
Brad, I don't know, were you here at WeatherWorks for that storm? I don't think
No,
so.
I was actually living in the Southeast, and no
so you
snow really down there.
have your sandals on and shorts and
Yeah.
hey, look at that storm. I don't care. But no, I remember the storm well, actually, because I was forecasting in Chicago, and I also did the certified snowfall totals for Illinois. So that storm was pretty amazing. I mean, really, I think they had like 20 inches of snow in Chicago area at O'Hare.
That was the one that shut down the lakeshore, right?
Yes. If you go
people abandoned cars and stuff.
If you Google Groundhog Day Blizzard 2011, you're probably going to find that picture of Lakeshore Drive, getting just vehicles stranded, and all that kind of stuff. So certainly a strong storm. I mean, there was, like I said earlier, there was gusts to 50 to 60 miles an hour or more. I think it was even 70 miles an hour in a few spots. So you're getting close to hurricane force wind gusts, which is pretty amazing in a winter storm. But then you also had lightning in that storm and thunder snow. Thunder snow is just basically lightning, like lightning happening within a snowstorm. It thunders, and they call it thunder snow. But that was amazing too.
Typically, big rates of snow are accompanied by that too.
Yeah, and you always, if you ever watch the Weather Channel, I'm sure you see, Jim Cantori.
Yeah.
He's in the heart of it, and doing snow angels because he got some thunder snow over him. But personally, for me, I don't know about you, Brad, but I haven't experienced thunder snow. Have you had any experience?
Yeah, I've seen it and heard it. Not a lot. I can maybe remember 2 times I've seen it happen or heard it happen, but it's not very common. It's within your strongest storms, obviously, and usually takes a strong nor'easter or blizzard to get that kind of. But yeah, basically, it's like it's amazing. You're like, what was that? Oh my gosh, that was lightning in the middle of it, and you hear the thunder, like, oh my gosh, it's thundering.
And the crazy thing about that was the drifts, because you had those winds in that Groundhog Day storm that were so strong that I saw pictures of snow drifts that were up to the second story of houses.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. I mean, I think there was 20 inches of snow that fell, but with those type of winds in the right conditions, you get those 10-foot drifts, which is pretty crazy.
And then you imagine the wind whipping through that city with those tall skyscrapers, just like they do in New York. It's like the canyon effect. I mean, the wind has to go somewhere, and it gets even stronger because it has to go through the middle of, all the buildings and things like that. So that was an amazing storm for the Midwest. That's for sure.
That's for sure. But even in the Mid-Atlantic, you can get hit. I mean, there's President's Day storms. If you want to look for a blizzard, just look around President's Day because
it happens a lot.
Yeah, that date always seems to happen in February where somebody gets a blizzard somewhere. But I believe they called it Snowmageddon, where they had that blizzard. They had actually 2 big, strong storms that came through. One was on the 5th and 6th. The next one was on the 9th and 10th. And I think they even had like 80 inches total for the year because of these big storms that happened. I think there was one even in December of 2009. So that winter was a huge winter for the Mid-Atlantic. And
Baltimore, D.C., they got some big time totals that year.
And that was interesting too, because turns out I was forecasting down there too. So I don't know what's good. Maybe they just put me where the big snows were happening. I don't know, when I was younger in my years at WeatherWorks, but I just remember like we do snow confidence boxes in our storm alert forecasts.
Right.
So that kind of outlines the entire range of possibilities of a storm, which our clients really like. But I remember doing those snow confidence boxes and saying, can I really do a 36 to 42 box? Is that cool? Because it was just amazing the amount of snow that was falling and how heavy it was falling. I
Yeah,
think
I'm
it's
just looking at some of the amounts here. Dallas ended up with 32.9.
right.
Philadelphia was 28.5. Baltimore had over 25 inches. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was that's a doozy.
Big storm, and folks down in Maryland were certainly having their issues with those storms, and I think they got all their snow for the next like 10 years in, in
Seems like
one
that,
year.
especially after last year. Some of those areas were struggling to even get an inch of something. It was at Philadelphia ended up with 0.3 for the year. It's amazing. And again, that storm. Talk about a gradient. Central Park only reported a trace of snow from Snowmageddon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty crazy, and that storm I believe came all the way down from Texas, and it brought so much moisture up through the Mississippi Valley, Tennessee Valley, and into the Mid-Atlantic there. So that
Yeah.
had so much moisture coming out of the Gulf. I think there was even a tropical feed into that, which brought that much moisture.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the last storm we really got to talk
Yeah. I
about.
was just gonna say we got to talk about it.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it yet, but the superstorm in 1993, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That was
some
the
people,
storm of the century.
yeah, that's what it's been deemed, the storm of the century. That's what we were talking about before with the different types of nor'easters that can affect the Northeast, where we started with this was a Miller A type storm that came out of the Gulf of Mexico. So it's bringing all that moisture and it came all the way up the eastern seaboard. And that storm was extremely strong. That brought snow, I think, from Mississippi and Alabama
Yeah.
all the way through the Northeast.
Yeah.
And it
Birmingham,
wasn't,
Alabama got 13 inches of snow out of that.
that's amazing. And I think
Yeah.
even down towards the coast had decent amount of snow, like 3 to 6 inches or something like
Yeah, I
that, or
think the
four to
Florida
eight inches.
Panhandle got snow. They got like 3 inches around close to Tallahassee and things like that. I mean, it's just unheard of.
Unbelievable. And that storm happened in March too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You're
so
thinking spring by then, but it was all winter that couple of days.
And I don't even think it was early March. I think it was like the middle of March or something like that. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was March 13th, 12th
Yeah,
and 13th.
and that was just an amazing storm. There was even a squall line that ripped through the Gulf of Mexico across Florida as that storm was developing. Lots of wind damage with that, and then all that rode right up the coast. I think that storm I think was like down to a 970 millibar low in the south, and then by the time it got up to the northeast, it was about in the 960s.
Yeah, the lowest pressure was 960 in that storm. So
Yeah,
that's amazing.
960. That was the record for Philadelphia, whatever that superstorm was, until Sandy came
Sandy,
through
yeah.
and brought the record low pressure a little
Right.
bit lower. So that just goes to show you what type of storm this was. I mean, just amazing. The superstorm in
Yeah,
'93.
and some of the snow amounts for the I-95 corridor weren't as impressive as you would think, only because what happened was they actually changed. The storm was so strong
Hmm.
that it started to snow in most of the areas, but the storm was so strong it brought in so much warm air from the south at the time.
Hmm.
It flipped a lot of those coastal areas and a lot of the main I-95 cities
Yeah.
over to rain for a time being, and then they went back to snow when the cold air came
Yeah.
back in. But there was still good amounts of snow. I'm not saying it didn't. I mean, Dulles
Yep.
still ended up with over a foot of snow. New York ended up with about a foot of snow. Same as Baltimore. But some of the high amounts, the highest amount out of any location that was recorded was on Mount LeConte, and that was in Tennessee. 69 inches of snow.
I mean, That's
Yeah.
just amazing. That's like
In
the
Tennessee
average.
too, mountains of Tennessee, Blue Ridge Mountains.
That's like the average amount of snow for probably some Worcester,
Yeah,
Massachusetts area for the entire
yeah,
year. So I mean, just an incredible storm. And coming back to the point of the changeover that happened and some of the mixing, that storm track was a little bit inland too,
that's why. Yeah,
which is what brought in that warm air. It wasn't usually the nor'easters. If you want a big snow for the I-95 corridor, they have to be more off the coast. Sometimes even for New England, you want that to be more towards the benchmark, they call it,
right.
which is basically due south of Cape Cod. Um, so yeah, a little bit further inland. I remember in the Lehigh Valley, we changed over to sleet, and I was so angry as a kid because I knew what sleet meant even then. If I got sleet, I knew the snow was done and we weren't going to see that much. I mean, I still got 18 inches of snow. So it's not like there was no snow that happened. But I believe that storm too, I mean, the winds behind it were quite strong. Ahead of it and behind it were quite strong.
Yeah, so you
Um,
had blizzard conditions both in front of it and on the back side of it.
Absolutely. And I remember watching those whiteout conditions that we talked about earlier, that near zero visibility happening ahead of the storm, because I would just see off in the distance, oh, the trees are disappearing. Oh, that house just disappeared. Oh, it's only a road away. And now here it is, and I can't see a thing at my house. So, a couple of those instances during the superstorm in '93, that's for sure. And I don't know if we're going to see a storm like that. I mean, obviously it's possible, but man, I mean, just the amount of snow that produced, the swath of snow from the Gulf Coast all the way through New England is just pretty amazing um, for a storm system. And I got to say, everything came together in that storm. I think, people talk about the polar vortex a lot. That goes around the poles
Right.
and brings all the cold air down. Well, what happened was in '93 is a piece of the polar vortex dropped into this
Into the
developing system.
storm, yeah,
Yeah,
basically.
it basically dropped all the way in. Um, it was just amazing. The whole thing cut off, and that's what created that. So if you ever have a piece of the polar vortex dropping into a storm, you have
That's
a big,
960
yeah,
millibars.
you have a problem, okay? It's gonna be quite crazy. But
And that's yeah, that's what led to all. I mean, like you said, even severe weather in that storm. I mean, there were tornadoes on the
yep,
west coast of Florida, and boats were capsized, and that was just again the strength of the storm. And
hmm
in the satellite, if you ever get a chance, Google it and check the satellite presentation of it. It's just amazing,
right.
just to watch how the storm develops and like you
It
said, comes out of the
explodes. Yeah,
Gulf and just explodes up the East Coast.
it.
And it's just a storm that. Where were you for that storm? I mean, you were probably a lot younger then, but
I was younger, yeah, but still in Lehigh Valley there in
yeah,
Pennsylvania.
it's
Um,
amazing that storm's now it was 27 years ago. Hard to believe.
yeah, and I still remember it too, and
Yeah,
that's crazy if you're just a kid. But yeah, I mean, like Brad said, the satellite was tremendous with that storm. You can see that classic comet head type
yeah,
development of a storm, and when you see that, you're obviously getting a deepening storm that's getting very mature and fully developed. So certainly check out that satellite picture. But Brad,
yeah.
I think we got to end on that. I don't think there's
Yeah, I
another
know.
storm
We
we
can
could
go
talk
on and
about.
on. We just like the snow the other podcasts we did on just the snow and snow types, and we were talking about snowstorms. We can go on and on.
And we talked about a lot of storms here, but I'm sure our New England folks are probably going to be pretty upset because we didn't really talk about
I
the
know.
'78 blizzard up there, which I
Well, that's a little
know
bit. Yeah, we're a
it's a
little
long
younger
time
then.
ago, yeah, but the '78 blizzard was just an amazing storm for eastern portions of New England. I mean, we're talking about 40 plus inch type snowfall amounts. Winds were, just amazing. I'm sure a lot of our clients who've been doing snow removal for a while will remember that. And even back to 2013, that they had that giant blizzard in 2013, which brought Connecticut 30 plus inches of snow too, and snowfall
Right.
rates of 6 inches an hour. And 6 inches an hour you don't get unless
No.
you're in like a lake effect snow band or something like that. Everybody has different stories about blizzards. So if you have a story about your blizzard, please drop us a line at weatherlounge@weatherworksinc.com. Throw a picture on there of your back door being snowed in or something like that. Otherwise, guys, this is pretty much it for our podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening. And please remember that we'll have a podcast like this every 2 weeks. Also visit us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those places. You can certainly find us. YouTube, subscribe to our channel. And as always, WeatherWorksInc.com is the place to go to find out what WeatherWorks does and what kind of weather services we provide for our clients. So until next time, we'll see you later.